One thing I do remember, in the mornings, sudden shock. The bell's ringing and nurse comes round and throws back these tall, curtains. That was your welcome to the day.
It was one of the ladies what used to come round and say, get up, and if your leg was still laying in bed, she'd strip the bed and you had to go then to wash.
There was a big washroom with basins all the way round, and the nurse would say, taps on, brushes under, and brush, and rinse. And it was all done in that very regimented way.
And you all had different colour toothbrushes which were put on a rack. And I used to be so scared that I'd forget which colour I had.
We had very good clothes, brown serge dress with the red bands on the cuffs and collar and black stockings.
Like a little Dutch cap, it was given out on Sunday, all starched and beautifully ironed.
You used to stand at the end of your bed and we had Holland aprons and they buttoned up the girl in front and then the nurse would do the one at the end.
The clothes we were wearing were the only clothes we had.
The uniform was long brown trousers made of very coarse material, a scarlet red waistcoat with brass buttons, and on Sundays we had to wear an Eton collar and a black bow.
And you was never allowed to do more than one button up on the jacket.
Then we would all file down. Everything, as I said, was in crocodile, 2 by 2. And then you would march along to breakfast, along to the dining room. And the dining room had lovely long oak tables and benches in Hogarth Handel Dickens' Coram, the houses. You did not speak. You only opened your mouth to eat. You were not allowed to speak.
And I remember we always had porridge for breakfast. I hate porridge. It wasn't even cooked properly. You had to chew it to get it down. And the nurse would stand me up on the bench and just about shovel it into me.
I remember the staff having fried breakfast, which smelt lovely. And their trolley used to come past us in the corridor, and we all looked at the food that had been left. So if nobody was looking, we would take the bacon rind off and eat it.
We all lined up after breakfast and went to the toilet. And we all given 2 pieces of paper. Now I don't think that was enough. I'd say it was a good thing. It taught me to be regular. No problem.
Yarders, we used to say yarders, that was the toilet paper.
Every morning we had to do number 2. And then if that didn't work, you were sent to the infirmary for a dose of syrup for figs.
When we were ill, I remember I was taken into the infirmary. When you went into the infirmary, especially when you were quite young, it was absolutely lovely. They really cared for you.
The nurse there was very good, actually. If you fancied something to eat, she would then go and get it. And I remember asking for some toast, buttered toast.
And then we were made to march here, there and everywhere. Hold hands in 2s.
You marched up the stairs to your different classes. You weren't allowed to talk or anything.
First lesson was mental arithmetic. You stood up and you recited your tables and other things, for instance, passages out of Shakespeare.
That's one of the things that I'm really grateful to the school for, that they taught me to read and to enjoy reading. So it's always been a solace to me ever since.
I did learn to read and write, and one thing I'm brilliant at is writing. Everybody remarks on my handwriting to this day.
We just have to write very slowly and carefully the alphabet, and we would do that day after day. And then if you had a smudge, you get the cane.
You went and you had religious education. That was, everybody had that.
We had religion shoved into us.
We went to church twice a day.
And 3 times on Sunday. And after that, I never went to church again. I said, that's enough for me.
We never did homework. There was never any homework set.
No, no exams at school, no homework. And we weren't pressed enough. We weren't obliged or forced to improve. The education itself was limited.
We're all cloned, we're all the same. And we didn't go out of the school, we didn't meet anybody else. You couldn't broaden your mind on anything because you didn't come up against anything to give you different feelings.
They gave me an education, yes. They didn't give me any love. They gave nothing you could build your life on.
There was several of the masters were bullies. If you'd done anything wrong, out of step or something, they'd say do that again and you catch something, you get a whack.
Of course the worst was the headmaster, Mr. Holgate, at assembly in the morning. In a very threatening way, he would tell us he would flog us within an inch of our lives if we got into any sort of trouble.
Our headmaster was headmaster of the boys, and the headmistress was headmistress over us, and they were both ghastly people. Very unlovable, very strict, extremely unkind. I doubt really if they were qualified.
You could get caned for next to nothing.
I remember sitting there in complete silence, and you could hear the boys being caned on the other side. You could hear the teachers screaming and the boys crying.
Their aim was to hit us, that was and you know, just to have iron discipline. They pretty much all, they carried a cane, they didn't carry one in their hand, they hid it down the trousers. And then one, who was it, Mr. Wall, he used to have a cricket stump down his trousers. Can you believe that?
Bad behaviour, really bad behaviour, was the cane across the backside. For minor misbehaving was strokes on the hand, but sometimes you take 3 on that hand and 3 on that. And they really did hurt.
I don't think you have the ability to realise in some instances what it was you were supposed to have done wrong, but it's one of those things that you learn to live with.
You were very quickly smacked down if you showed in any way, shape or form you're being too bold, you think you're clever, you think, you know, and you might try to shine at something, but you weren't ever allowed to revel in it. You weren't ever allowed to feel that you were the best.
Talking usually. That was my worst crime. Talking in class and talking after light. I had my tongue tied up a string for talking after lights out.
Masters were a bit rough, weren't they, Jim?
Some of the masters, and some were very nice. It doesn't sound a lot now, but I recall that on each boy's birthday, she would get the class to sing Happy Birthday, and she'd give the boy a sweet.
But another teacher we had who never used the cane was Mr. McClellan, and he was a really gifted teacher, and he did the best he could, you know. He used to say to us, I don't need to teach you, you know. I could teach at the public school. And he said, but I teach you kids because I feel it's my duty.
With 200 odd boys, the discipline had got to be pretty strict, and it really was. But it stood us in good stead when we went to the military service.
The odd cuddle would have been lovely, you know. Even a pat on the head would have been nice, but you didn't get it, no.
Then 12 o'clock was lunch, so we'd all be marched back to the dining room again.
You stood at your table and you waited for the gavel to be banged, and you turned and faced the table. You banged again, you put up your hands and you said grace. You banged again and you sat down. You were not allowed to speak during the course of the meal, and you banged again at the end and you stood up and you marched out.
You knew exactly on Monday exactly what the meal was going to be. You knew on Tuesday what the meal was going to be. What you had last week, you knew you were going to get this week.
Mutton with plenty of fat on, and those white beans.
I've never forgotten the boiled rice served in lumps.
We used to have a lot of semolina and the one that looks like frog spawn. Tapioca.
Thursday was fish and Friday was meat pie and apples.
You can imagine the smells that used to waft around. The fish was always steamed or boiled, or it wasn't fried, it smelt. And also the other smell that stays with you is cabbage.
We used to get the awful white margarine. Oh God, it was foul. But we used to cut it in chunks and put it under the table, because we reckoned if we were due for the stick the following day, we'd actually coat our hands with it. And then you'd hold your hands at an angle and you'd hope it would slide off.
And the meat that had that thick yellow fat around it, we'd cut the yellow fat off, and we had big baggy knickers. So we'd put this fat up our knicker leg and throw it down the toilet or anywhere.
I'll never forget one day I was physically sick at the table because I wasn't very well. I wasn't very old. And they took the dinner away and sent me out in the corridor until I felt better. And when I got back, there was another plate of dinner to eat. I don't know how I ate it. I think it was cabbage and something. And I looked back and I thought, how cruel. How could you do that?
We would be sent outside almost regardless of the weather conditions. But I do remember the cold and being under those colonnades, literally all huddling together to try and keep warm, which sounds ridiculous, but we did.
The games we used to play, whips and tops, we used to play marbles, rounders. We even used to get string and twigs from the playground to do knitting.
We'd play things like Here We Come Gathering Nuts and May, which was a singing game, and Farmer's in His Den and Farmer Takes a Wife, all those sort of nursery games. But the teachers watched us, they didn't organise anything.
It was nice in the summer when we could go out and play in the fields. We used to climb the trees and things like that.
In the summer it used to be quite good when the gang mowers were going around cutting the grass and we'd all charge around behind getting showered in all this grass.
Behind the school there were allotments, and that's where we used to go scrumping for the carrots. Just grab these carrots, rub them down, never thought of washing them, shove them under your pillow, and it was lovely, lovely, lovely to eat, you know, raw carrots.
We used to smoke our bootlaces. We cut our bootlaces short, get the toilet paper, roll them up, and it tasted foul. I don't know where we got the matches from, but we did get all the matches.
My next memory was that the gates were always locked in Berkhamsted School, and the only time we were taken out was on a Sunday afternoon. We always turned left out of the school, which was safe for the staff because we didn't need to go into the town.
Down the roads, a couple of miles out, and then come back a couple of miles, you know. That was all military, you know. Keep up there, you know.
We did some form of exercise every single day.
We used to learn to do exercises, you know, just swinging your arms and throwing your legs up in the air and all that, and marching to the band.
Thursday afternoon was all sports, with football, cricket or whatever.
They encouraged that because we were there 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and the teachers had to keep us occupied.
The cricket I liked, I wasn't very good at it, but I liked it.
Netball, I loved the netball. Although I was short, they let me always be the shooter because I always was a good shooter. And lacrosse, I loved that, and hockey.
In the gymnasium, we used to have a game which was called Tarzan. The idea was you would climb beams and wall bars and ropes swinging around, and as long as you didn't touch the ground with your feet, you continued to be in the game, and I loved that game.
The PT instructor was a wicked man, and to get us to swim, we all used to line up on the swimming pool, and he used to push us in at the deep end to make us swim. Had some near misses, but nobody drowned.
Our PE teacher, she was very brutal. Everybody was frightened of her, and we learnt to swim through fear.
Mr. Gordon used to line us up along the wall there, and he used to love picking on those that couldn't swim, to throw you in. And then he'd be there with a long stick, and he'd watch you floundering, kids floundering, and then hand them a stick, and then he'd go to pull them out, and he'd go, shove them under.
I got into sports, I got into swimming, I was in the swimming team, we won galas, and that was a way out of getting out of the school, going to different places.
But swimming, that was something of a passion, and that stayed with me. I still swim competitively, and it has its roots in school.
We used to have one afternoon making raffia work and mats and that.
We made the clothes for the children in the foster homes. We made little dresses. Senior girls made the tippets and aprons.
We made dressing gowns. We made French knickers with the shell stitch edging on. When you were learning to do hem stitches, if you didn't get them all even, you had to keep undoing them and redoing it and undoing it and redoing it and undoing it and redoing it.
And the other thing we had, of course, was music lessons, singing, learning to play in the band.
That's one lesson, I suppose, that I do remember is the music lessons. I used to love them. And there was about a dozen rose bushes outside the music room, and I could smell them wafting in. It's lovely, it really was.
There was this thing about the chapel, the peace, the quiet, that wasn't there in everyday life. And when I first heard the organ playing, I remembered being completely overwhelmed. And I said to one of the other boys, that was beautiful. And I remember him looking at me as if I was mad, because you didn't use words like beautiful. There was nothing beautiful about the Foundling Hospital in a sense.
What I remember particularly was Stephen Foster songs. And there was something about Stephen Foster songs that really, I could wept. Old Man River, longing for the old folks at home. Yeah, that one used to really get me.
The things about all the chores we had to do, one of them was when you were on detention on Saturday afternoon, we would have to clean and polish the floors of the corridors between the dormitories. And it was such a dirty job that we used to strip down to our underwear and bare feet. And they would give us these old blankets to buff the floors. One of us sat in the blanket and pulled it up over your head to protect your head and your body. And then the others would pull you up and down the floor on the blanket, so you'd buff the floors on your butt. That's how we made a game of all the punishments we had.
That's another thing I used to like, was shoe cleaning, because we used to have shoe inspection. I used to love cleaning shoes, and to this very day I just love it.
Tie your own laces, you made your own bed, the nurse taught you to darn your socks. If you had any problems, who could you talk to? Nobody. They were yours.
They had what they euphemistically called Mother's Day.
The highlight of school, we used to have what they call Mum's Day, was when your foster mother would come to visit you. They'd bring you whatever, some sweets or something, or have made you a cake or something like that, and that was magical that day.
In June, I remember the weather being good, and we were allowed to be outside with them, and we just spent the afternoon with them, because obviously they would have had to leave again by 4. I mean, it was a short visit, but, I do remember it.
Some of the foster mothers used to bring parcels. She never ever came to us. We just sit there and watch the other kids if they got something.
My mother never came once. Well, it was rejection again, wasn't it? It was just loneliness and rejection. You know, you couldn't understand. Every time, you never learn. As a child, you don't learn. Next time, oh, she's bound to come. I probably wouldn't recognise her, but every time it was, or maybe next time. But next time never came. No, it never came at all.
We used to have tea in the afternoon, which would consist of perhaps bread and treacle, bread and golden syrup, or bread and jam, and a slice of cake, generally plain cake.
Sunday, we thought it was rather lovely because we had a bun. We called it a Sunday bun, you know, and it was a currant bun.
We used to have what you call a dough cake. Actual fact, what it really was, now we know, it was bread pudding.
I just remember Monday, everybody had a lump of raisins to eat.
When you went up to get your sweet, someone would get hold of your spoon and put the bowl of the spoon in your water and then dip it in the salt and put it back by your side. And even to this day, I pick up a spoon and I always wipe it. You know, it's a thing I've never forgotten.
Certainly as far as the masters were concerned, they had their own dining room and they had their own lounges, and they would be off spending most of their time playing snooker and what have you, and we were supervised by the elder boys.
Certain big boys were supposed to be the supervisors. Unfortunately, some of them were bullies. Not all of them, but some of them were.
I've talked about it many a time with old boys and girls, and the boys seem to have had a much harder life than we did.
Wednesday night was called Bashing Up Night. That's when any boys that had been cheeky to the big boys went in the boot room and they put in groups and they used to throw this carbolic soap at you.
The other favourite one was where we would be expected to stand on one leg with our eyes closed and with our arms above our heads, and then they would just come round and hit us or whatever.
You know, you were thinking, worrying, oh God, it's going to happen again tonight.
Trust you in the blanket and let it go and you're thumped on the floor.
I don't think they bullied because they meant to bully. It was just frustration, I believe, because we're all the same and there was no outlet.
Bigger boys hitting me, and I used to take it out of the little ones just to get it out of my system.
What the teachers did want to know. And you're covered in bruises from head to foot. You daren't say how you got it. You just say you fell down the stairs or you fell over in the playground. You daren't tell tales.
Something that happened to me several times. You'd get in this bath of freezing cold water and make you get into it, and then they'd push you under and hold you down until you were struggling. And then you'd get up, take a gasp of air, and then they'd push you straight down again. And so you'd had your cold bath and went to bed.
I was getting worse and worse, and then I developed a habit of bedwetting, which to me was shameful in a way, and this then entailed more punishment. So then I became frightened to sleep.
In every residential school in the country, there has always been bullying for year immemorial, really. I think the big difference was we were totally captive 365 days a year with nowhere to go.
When you look back in hindsight, it was very frightening for a 7-year-old child to have to put up with all of this. You just don't forget it. You don't forget it. By about 7 o'clock, I think we were back up into the wards and going to bed.
You see, the dormitories there, they were just big, wide open spaces with these iron beds and no cupboards, no mirrors.
We were allowed no ornaments, no photographs, no pictures. You had your brush and your comb, and in the bottom you had your spare knickers and socks. And your uniform in the side, and then nothing else, nothing was allowed to be out of place.
I always remember having my hair washed. I hated that. We had to kneel down while they washed your first part of your hair and you shoved you along to the next one, you put the water all over you.
We had to kneel on the end of our beds with the windows open and say our prayers, and we had to brush our hair 100 times. And we did that every day until I was about 13.
You was allowed to read for a while, but you had to have the lights turned out, so you weren't allowed to get out of bed and go and sit on another girl's bed and talk. But of course, a lot of them done that and got into trouble.
We used to have midnight feasts. Well, I think we used to try and save food up. You know, we'd stash it all away.
People say to us, well, what did you have to eat? Oh, when we had this currant bun once a week, we'd save it up 2, 3, 4 weeks. Wouldn't care if it was stale. And the carrots we scrumped, put them under your pillow, and that was our midnight feast. Oh, it was wonderful. Wonderful.
I think the war years were the blackest years, you know.
But come the end of the war, it changed. It was like somebody switched the light on.
It sort of opened us up a lot. And also we had more modern teachers. They seemed like a breath of fresh air.
And we had a new headmaster who was a man called Ernest White.
He altered the way teaching was done. He just altered the routines, and he had he brought the staff out of their own dining room and put them in with the school, and he opened the doors to the girls' dining hall. The doors were opened and life seemed to change completely.
And then also with him came all these lovely teachers, and these people were kind, they were normal, they were loving. I mean, they would actually give you a hug. Before that, nobody had even put their hand on your arm as a gesture. I mean, if anyone got near you, it was really to give you a whack, you know. So life was totally different, and life began to be wonderful.
The headmaster allowed us to break the wards up into little sections. We could have curtains, we could have wardrobes, which we didn't have before. It was this transition from the very regimental, disciplined environment to this very relaxed one, and we went wild.
I think we must have been allowed to mix at a certain stage, because I remember a few of the boys chasing the girls around bushes and that in the fields.
Saturday night they used to say, you know, boys one side, girls the other, and try and get you to dance. And that was a bit weird and traumatic, I suppose.
Tell you what was a very exciting time at school. We used to have film shows. Oh, I loved them.
And of course drama was after school as well.
We put on musical plays.
It was lovely when we did plays. The girls didn't have to play the boys' parts. Suddenly, you know, we could cast them in the right gender roles. That was good.
I suppose after the war, after all the changes, it seemed easier somehow.
We were together 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We woke up in the same ward, we went to the same washroom, we marched out to breakfast together, we were in the playground together, we go in the classroom together, we go to dinner together, we go play together, we go in the classroom together, we go and play again. In the evening we go to tea together. We go to bed at night and we're in the same ward again, and we're never separated. And we do that 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.